Alright folks, next weapon class is axes. So first we've got the sacrificial axe, C scaling in strength. I've infused it with cold for some bonus damage, and if we look at the description, every time we kill an enemy, we get a small amount of mana back. The sacrificial axe is going to drop from a death bird just north of Morn Castle. The next weapon is Rosas' axe with a C scaling in strength and intelligence. Rosas' axe can be found in a stone sword key wall inside the Black Knife Catacombs, which is along the eastern edge of Liurnia. Just follow the road north. I really like the double axe moveset. Its focus is mainly on single targets, but it's really good about keeping an enemy staggered. Last thing to mention is the weapon art. You're going to summon 3 skeleton buddies. If you can hit with at least one of them, you should be good. And of course, gotta love the double slam. Alright folks, this is Colossal Swords, part 1. As you can see in the left hand, I always use this Zweihander because it's really light. I have Barbaric Roar and I've infused it with cold. You can buy the Zweihander at the Isolated Merchant's Shack. In the right hand, I have the Godslayer's Greatsword. The Godslayer's Greatsword can be found at the very bottom of the Divine Tower of Caelid. So the moveset is the same when you dual wield Colossal Weapons and Colossal Swords. I will say the Godslayer Greatsword has a unique light attack that's insanely fast. And finally, let's talk about the Godslayer weapon art. I use this a lot on dragons, and I can tell you it's probably one of the most damaging weapon arts in the entire game. Alright folks, this is Colossal Swords Part 2. Our first weapon is the Star Scourge Greatsword. Obviously this is Radahn's weapon, so to get it, you gotta kill Radahn. The next weapon is Malekith's Black Blade. It's a similar story. If you want to get this, you gotta kill Malekith at the end of Farum Azula. I love Radahn's Greatswords because technically this is the lightest dual Colossal Sword that you can use. Also, everybody knows it, the weapon art is just wonderful. And finally, Malekith's weapon art is really slow, but if you can land that final stab, then you're going to do absurd damage right there. Alright folks, this is part 3 of Colossal Swords. Our first weapon is the Ruins Greatsword. To get the Ruins Greatsword, you want to kill the boss in Redmane Castle before you trigger the festival. The next weapon is the Royal Greatsword. This is actually Blythe's weapon. To get Blythe's weapon, the Royal Greatsword, you need to complete Ronnie's quest, then return to her rise and you should find him waiting outside. And the honorable mention, the Grafted Blade Greatsword. And finally, you get the Grafted Blade Greatsword from completing Castle Morn. Alright, weapon arts, real quick. Here's the Ruins Greatsword. You can launch almost anything into the air. Here's Blythe's weapon art. It's a 2-parter, and both attacks deal pretty decent damage. And finally, the Grafted Blade is going to give you 5 points in every stat, but when you're as high a level as me, it's not very useful. Alright everybody, welcome to Colossal Weapons Part 1. In the left hand, we've got Giza's Wheel. Giza's Wheel is dropped by Inquisitor Giza on the 2nd floor of Volcano Manor. If you look to the left of Tanith, you should see a set of stairs. In the right hand, we've got the Axe of Godfrey. To get this, you're going to need to kill Hoarah before the final boss. The Colossal Weapon moveset is slow, but it deals heavy stagger damage. So the question is, can you stagger the enemy before they can stagger you? Last thing to talk about, Regal Roar. Regal Roar unlocks special combo attacks that have insane poise and do massive damage. One more thing, I'm sure we all know the spinning wheel for Giza's weapon, but did you also know that when you heavy attack with this weapon, it spins the wheel just like the weapon art? Alright folks, welcome to Colossal Weapons Part 2. The first weapon we've got is the Falling Star Beast Jaw. To get the Falling Star Beast Jaw, you'll need to kill the Falling Star Beast right before Volcano Manor. The next weapon we've got is the Watchdog's Staff. To get the Watchdog's Staff, come to Road's End Catacombs. There's a second set of stairs to the left. Turn all the way around, and there should be 2 illusory walls. You'll find the staff behind there. Let's talk about weapon arts. The Falling Star Beast Jaw has the Gravity Bolt weapon art. You can basically stagger anyone from a really far distance away. Super nice. And finally, the Watchdog's Staff is going to summon these little bolts of magic. As long as you're in an open area, it should deal massive damage. Alright folks, this is the final part of Colossal Weapons. Our first weapon is the Giant Crusher. The Giant Crusher can be found in a chest just south of the entrance into Leyendell. The next weapon is the Prelate's Inferno Crozier. The Crozier can be found on a fire prelate inside of Fort Lade. I love the Giant Crusher because of its heavy attack. It's basically Lion's Claw, and you can follow it up with another slam. The Crozier is pretty cool. This attack reminds me a lot of the Black Knight Great Axe, and the weapon art is also a little corny and super fun to play around with. You can go as long as you want with this attack, and you finish it off with an overhead launch. The first class is my favorite class, Curved Greatswords. We always start with the left weapon. Magma Wyrm's Scale Sword has a B scaling in Strength and Faith at +9, with a total AR of 782 over on the right. To get the Scale Sword, you want to follow this gorge at the north end of Liurnia and end up at the ruin-strewn precipice. Over here is my favorite weapon, the Bloodhound's Fang, with a C in Strength and a B in Dex at rank 10. And you can see it has a total AR of 728, all physical. The Bloodhound's Fang is probably the best early game weapon, and you get it at the Forlorn Hound Everjail, just at the south end of Limgrave. Last thing to mention is the attack. I love the double curved greatsword because a lot of your attacks are going to be wide circles that are really easy to hit. Okay folks, there's one more thing I gotta mention. I just want you to watch the damage numbers. That's the weapon art for 1300. Let's try and land this double slam. Also 1300. There you go. That's all the information you need. Alright folks, we have a surprise entry. Curved Greatswords Part 2. In the left hand, we have a blood-infused dismounter. To get the dismounter, you need to kill Kaiden warriors. I start at the Lake of Agheel south, and if you take this road north, you'll meet 3 of them along the way. There's the first one, and the other 2 are just past those rocks. And in the right hand, we have Morgoth's Cursed Sword. Obviously, to get this, you need to kill Morgoth, the Omen King. So Morgoth's Cursed Sword doesn't deal a lot of damage, but the weapon art is really where it shines. It's just so cool. I mean, what's not to love about it? Alright folks, let's talk about Curved Swords. Part 1. In the left hand, we've got the blood-infused Scavenger's Curved Sword. The Scavenger's Curved Sword can be found in Mount Gelmir. If you start at the first Gelmir campsite and cross this rocky bridge, the sword will be guarded by a grafted scion. And in the right hand, we've got the Magma Blade. The Magma Sword only drops from Man Serpents. If you start at the Temple of Iglay in Volcano Manor and enter that elevator, you should find 2 of them. So Curved Swords is a lot like Daggers, where the basic combo is really spammable. I will also mention the running attack and the jumping attack are 4 hits all at once. And finally, the Magma Blade does insane damage for a Curved Sword. But this weapon art, you really have to hit them in the face with it. Alright folks, let's talk about Curved Swords, Part 2. Our first weapon is the Wing of Astel. To get the Wing of Astel, start at the Ainsel River main and take the river southwest. Once you reach the Ants, you want to take a left. The last step is to follow this rock ledge to the right over by those 2 pillars. And now, in that chest in front of me is the Wing of Astel. The next weapon is the Eclipse Shotel. The Eclipse Shotel can be found in the Church of the Eclipse, which is part of Castle Sol, in the northern part of the mountaintops of the Giants. The Wing of Astel weapon art launches a cloud of gas that detonates after a delay. That delay has messed me up a lot. The Eclipse Shotel weapon art creates an explosion in front of you, but it's really hard to land. I like it because it adds a flat damage buff. Super nice on fast weapons. And finally, the very last weapon class, Daggers. Our first weapon is the Reduvia. The Reduvia drops from Bloody Finger Nereus in this little ravine right at the start of the game. And the next weapon is the Black Knife. And the Black Knife drops from a Black Knife Assassin right in front of Sainted Hero's grave up in Altus Plateau. So because daggers have such short range, your best bet is going to be stay in close and spam the normal combo. Dodging perfectly really becomes important with these weapons. And finally, weapon arts. The Reduvia is going to launch a Bloodblade, but it's not going to take any health damage, which is kind of nice. But the Black Knife ranged attack is so effective because it deals damage based off the Rune of Death. Just like Malekith's Blade, it's going to drain health and reduce max HP. Alright folks, let's talk about fists and claws. In the left hand, we've got the Grafted Dragon. To get this, you need to kill Godric the Grafted. In the right hand, we've got the Veteran's Prosthesis. To get the Prosthesis, you're going to need to kill Commander Nile at the very end of Castle Sol. And the honorable mention is the Blood-infused Bloodhound Claws. To get the Bloodhound's Claws, you're going to need to kill the Bloodhound Knight that separates the manor from the actual legacy dungeon of Volcano Manor. The biggest downside of these weapons is their range. The jumping attack has decent range, but I will say the combos are really long, so it's kind of fun. I love the Grafted Dragon weapon art, but if you want it to be effective, you have to hit someone right in the face with it. This is the Storm Kick weapon art. Both of those hits are going to have really good stagger potential. I'm sure you guys know about Bloodhound Step, but for me, it really just takes the joy out of dodging attacks. Alright folks, let's talk about Flails. In the left hand, we've got the Blood-infused Knight Rider Flail. The Knight Rider Flail drops from a Knight's Cavalry just north of Castle Morn. In the right hand, we've got the Bastard Stars. This is Astel's signature weapon, so to get it, you have to kill Astel. And the honorable mention is the Family Heads. And the Family Heads is found at the end of Sage's Cave up in Altus Plateau. So all of the moves for the double flail are the same as the hammer and the axe. So lots of stagger as usual. The Bastard Stars weapon art is really slow, but if you can land that first hit, you're very likely to trap the enemy in those secondary explosions. The Family Heads weapon art is kind of cool, but I have some gripes with it. The cast time is slow, the projectiles are kind of slow, and I wish the projectiles had a bit more range. Alright folks, this video is all about great axes. As you can see, this video is going to be a lot simpler. For my great axes, I have two Great Omen Killer Cleavers. One of them has Lion's Claw, the other has Barbaric Roar, with a C scaling in strength and a Frost infusion for that bonus cold damage, along with the bleed. The first Omen Killer Cleaver can be found in Volcano Manor right at the start of the area. There should be an area to your left that you can drop down into, and you'll find an Omen Killer in there. The second cleaver can be found in Perfumer's Grotto, which is just to the left of the main road into Leyendell. The combo for the great axes is really nice. It's a lot of slam attacks, so you're going to be able to power through enemies' hits with this. And finally, of course, you gotta love it, Lion's Claw. Awesome. And then once again, the double slam is going to deal huge damage. So we talked about great axes. Now let's talk about great hammers. In the left hand, we've got the Great Stars, C scaling in strength. It comes with innate bleed, so I'm going to add cold onto that for a double status effect. To get the Great Stars, come to the north end of this forest. Right next to this bonfire, there should be a cart being pulled by some giants. In the right hand, we've got the Beast Claw Great Hammer, C scaling in strength and dex. To get the Beast Claw Hammer, just talk to Garank, and once you've given him 7 Death Root, he should give you the hammer. The double Great Hammer combo is the same as the Great Axe, so if you like trading and you like staggering, this weapon is for you. Last thing to show off, those claws are going to travel really well, and also the double slam, it's going to do huge damage. Alright folks, welcome to part 1 of Great Spears. In the left hand, we have the Tree Spear. To get the Tree Spear, go to Liurnia and end up on this eastern road. If you follow it all the way south, you should find it at the end of a caravan. In the right hand, we have Vike's War Spear. It's one of the only weapons that deals madness damage. To get his War Spear, you're going to have to kill Vike at the Church of Inhibition, which is just to the northwest of the Frenzied Flame Village. I really love the double Great Spear moveset. Because you attack simultaneously, you'll almost always land both weapon hits. Also, the jumping attack has really long range. Vike's weapon art is really awesome. The only downside is that madness will only proc on humanoid enemies. That means giant bosses won't be affected. Alright folks, welcome to part 2 of Great Spears. In the left hand, we've got Mogwyn's Sacred Spear. To get this, you're going to have to kill Mog, Lord of Blood. And in the right hand, we've got Siluria's Tree. To get Siluria's Tree, you're going to have to kill Crucible Knight Siluria at the very end of Deeproot Depths. We've got a little bit of extra time, so I thought I would mention some different attacks. The running attack for a lot of two-handed weapons is really good at closing distances, and the rolling attack is good if you want to land some quick hits in between attacks. Last but not least, let's talk about weapon arts. You gotta love Mogwyn's weapon art. The only problem is it's super slow, really easy to get knocked out of it. And finally, Siluria's Woe. You can charge this up to do a projectile that will almost always stagger an enemy. Alright folks, this is the big one. Let's talk about Greatswords, part 1. Our first weapon is Marais Executioner's Sword. You get this from Elamir of the Briar, the boss of the Shaded Castle. And our next weapon is Ordovis's Greatsword. Ordovis's Greatsword drops from the double Crucible Knight fight at the end of Oriza's Hero's Grave. So just like other slow weapons, your best bet is going to be the jumping double slam. I like to follow that up with the normal combo, that is if I don't get smacked right in the face. Okay, let's talk weapon arts. The Marais Greatsword weapon art is pretty dope. The secret is whether you can charge it all the way or not, because then you'll deal massive stagger damage. And finally, Ordovis's Greatsword. The secret for me is charging it so that the enemy is only in range right at the very last moment. Alright folks, let's talk about Greatswords, part 2. Our first weapon is the Dark Moon Greatsword. You get this at the end of Ranni's quest, which is way too complicated for me to go over in one video. Our next weapon is the Golden Order Greatsword. The Golden Order Greatsword can be found in the Cave of the Forlorn. Just follow this frozen river east. And the last weapon is the Gargoyle's Black Blade. And finally, the Black Blade drops from a gargoyle in front of the Bestial Sanctum. Okay, let's talk weapon arts. The Dark Moon Greatsword is going to add cold and magic damage when you buff it. It's going to make it so that the heavy attack also shoots a projectile, but it's pretty slow. The Golden Order weapon art is a two-parter. My goal with this is to stagger an enemy, but if you can't stagger them, you're screwed. And finally, the Black Blade. This is the same as Malekith's weapon. It comes from the Rune of Death, so it drains health and reduces max HP. Alright folks, Greatswords Part 3. Our first weapon is the Blasphemous Blade. To get this, you need to kill Ricard in the Volcano Manor. Our next weapon is the Sacred Relic Sword. You can only get this if you beat the final boss, the Elden Beast. And the last weapon is the Sword of Milos. The Sword of Milos is from the Dung Eater, which is really complicated. I'll go over the basics. First thing you need is a Seedbed Curse from Volcano Manor near the teleporter to Ricard. Giving that curse to the Dung Eater will get you a key, which unlocks a cell in the subterranean shunning grounds. There you'll find the real Dung Eater. You can kill him for his weapon. Okay, weapon arts, real quick. This is Sacred Relic Sword. The range on that attack is honestly comical. The same can be said about the Blasphemous Blade. This explosion also heals you for a little bit. And finally, the Shriek of Milos will reduce enemy defenses for an insanely long amount of time. Alright folks, the last part of Greatswords, part 4. Our first weapon is Death's Poker. So Death's Poker drops from a Deathbird on the road to Redmane Castle. It's very near Ekizyx, just make sure to come here at night. And the next weapon is Helfen's Steeple. Helfen's Steeple drops from a Tibia Mariner on the mountaintops near Castle Sol. And the honorable mention, the Cold-Infused Iron Greatsword. The Iron Greatsword drops from red-haired misbegotten warriors. If you start at the Avenue Balcony in Leandel and take the road northeast, you'll find 2 of them on the road to the Forbidden Lands. And finally, let's talk about weapon arts. Helfen's Steeple is going to buff itself with frost damage and add extra damage. And finally, I'm sure you've seen Death's Poker. It has 2 attacks, a ranged attack that reaches really far, and an explosion that is really, really powerful. Alright folks, let's talk a little bit about Halberds. In the left hand, we've got the Golden Halberd. Absolutely absurd damage output. I'm sure most of you know this, but to get the Golden Halberd, you have to kill the first Tree Sentinel right at the start of the game. In the right hand, we've got Loretta's War Sickle. Has a nice weapon art and also has a unique moveset that we'll get into later. To get Loretta's War Sickle, you need to come to Miquella's Haligtree. He's the boss that prevents you from going into Elphael. So let's talk about 2 things. First of all, Loretta's War Sickle has a unique weapon art that's way faster. And also, the 2-handed moveset, while slow, is wide and deals heavy stagger damage. Also, let's mention the jumping attack, which is a slam. Super nice. Last thing to mention, Loretta's Slash is a combat skill, but if we use the left-hand weapon, I love having a buff in that slot. Be it Barbaric Roar or Seppuku, it's always good to have that backup buff just so you can enhance yourself. Alright folks, we've got another surprise entry, Halberds Part 2. Our first weapon is the Dragon Halberd. The Dragon Halberd drops from a Dragonkin soldier. Start at the Worshipper's Woods and head south until you find this collapsed pillar. Over here is a waygate with the Dragonkin soldier behind it. And the next weapon is the cold-infused Knight Rider Glaive. The Knight Rider Glaive drops from a Knight's Cavalry along the Bellum Highway. You can access this from the main gate of Raya Lucaria. So let's talk about weapon arts. The Dragon Halberd has a spinning slash followed by a lightning strike. It's going to apply frost lightning to your weapon. This was actually recommended to me by someone on TikTok. So I have two different weapon arts on the Knight Rider Glaive. The first one is Phantom Slash. This is going to be 4 hits and it deals heavy stagger damage. And finally, shout out to the guy on TikTok who's doing the helicopter build. This is really good for applying cold. Okay everybody, today we're going to be talking about regular hammers. So in the left hand, I've got the Morning Star. I've infused it with Barbaric Roar and a Bleed infusion. All the stats can be found right at the bottom. The Morning Star can be found in a carriage right at the start of the main road into the Weeping Peninsula. In the right hand, we've got Marika's Hammer. The only way to get this is to actually kill the final boss, but it's so worth it. We've also got one honorable mention, the Ringed Finger. To find the Ringed Finger, stay in the first part of Gelmir Hero's grave, run past the lava, past the chariot, and you should find an alcove to the left that has a chest in it. Ringed Finger has huge stagger, but you really gotta time it properly. And of course, Marika's Hammer, huge AoE, huge hyper armor, really decent aerial attack. Last thing to mention, the combo is the same as the axes, except the jumping attack is a little bit better than the axes. Alright folks, let's talk about heavy rapiers. In the left hand, we have the Bloody Helus. The Bloody Helus can be found in Writhe-Blood Ruins at the north end of Altus Plateau. And in the right hand, we have the Dragon King's Cragblade. You get this from Dragonlord Placidus Axe. And the honorable mention is the blood-infused Godskin Stitcher. You get the Godskin Stitcher from the Godskin Noble found in Volcano Manor. So the Bloody Helus weapon art reminds me a lot of the Bloodhound's Fang. First is a tactical retreat, followed by a heavy stagger attack. And finally, the Cragblade weapon art is going to turn you into a Thundercloud. I just want to note, the Thundercloud will also stagger enemies, so it's good to hit enemies in the face with this attack. Alright folks, let's talk about another insanely strong weapon class, Katanas, Part 1. In the left hand, we've got the blood-infused Nagakiba. You get this from Yura's quest. You should check out my Twinblades video for that quest. In the right hand, we've got the Hand of Malenia. Obviously, to get this, you have to kill Malenia, Blade of Mikola. And the honorable mention, the Dragon Scale Blade. To get the Dragon Scale Blade, you need to kill the Dragonkin soldier in the southeastern corner of the Lake of Rot. So Hand of Malenia and Nagakiba have really long reach. I'll say that the regular combo is kind of strange, but the jumping attack and the rolling attack for katanas are lightning quick. I'm sure you know the Hand of Malenia weapon art. The key to this is whether you can stagger the enemy, because if you can't, then you're going to get knocked out of this attack. And finally, the Dragon Scale Blade is a two-parter. The actual weapon hit deals more damage than the lightning strike, but it does have really pitiful range. Alright folks, let's talk about katanas, Part 2. Our first weapon is the Moon Veil. The Moon Veil is dropped by the boss of Gale Tunnel. The next weapon is the Rivers of Blood. To get the Rivers of Blood, you're going to be invaded at the Church of Repose on the mountaintops of the Giants. The Moon Veil weapon art has two different hits. The light attack is going to be faster and better against groups, but the heavy attack is stronger and hits further. And of course, the Rivers of Blood. This weapon art is probably one of the strongest attacks in the entire game. It is kind of comical. Alright folks, let's talk about normal rapiers. In the left hand, we have the Frozen Needle. To get the Frozen Needle, head to King's Realm Ruins and go to the northeastern corner. You should find a false floor over here. And in the right hand, we have the blood-infused Antspur Rapier. To get the Antspur Rapier, head to the northwest of the Shaded Castle. In this field, you'll find an NPC that has the weapon. So rapiers are a lot like daggers and curved swords, where speed and mobility is key. I think the best part is that the combo is really fast, and it's easy to transition from attacking to dodging almost instantly. Alright folks, let's talk about scythes. In the left hand, we have the blood-infused Grave Scythe. The Grave Scythe only drops from skeletons. There's a graveyard right at the start of Liurnia, just down the hill. You can farm them here. In the right hand, we've got the Winged Scythe. The Winged Scythe can be found in the Tombsword Ruins, which is in the Weeping Peninsula. And the honorable mention is going to be the Halo Scythe. To get the Halo Scythe, you need to kill Cleanrot Knights. I always start at the Commander O'Neill bonfire, and you'll find some knights wandering around. So kind of like the Halberds, the jumping attack is really nasty, but the combo is going to be kinda slow. The Winged Scythe weapon art has heavy stagger and also covers a really long distance. I love the Halo Scythe weapon art, but you need a lot of space to use this ranged attack effectively. Alright folks, let's talk about spears. In the left hand, we have the Inquisitor's Girandole. To get the Inquisitor's spear, start at the schoolhouse classroom. You want to drop onto the lift as it's going down. At the bottom of the lift, you'll find an Abductor Virgin. Let it grab you, and you have to die while you're inside of it. Then it'll teleport you to Volcano Manor. And in the right hand, we have the Bolt of Grand Sax. To get the Bolt of Grand Sax, start at the Erdtree Sanctuary and exit through the western door. Take the elevator down and follow this balcony. Right down there should be the Bolt of Grand Sax on that massive lightning bolt. The basic combo for the spears is going to be a lightning fast poke. And funny enough, the rolling attack and the running attack are exactly the same. All of those moves are insanely useful. And finally, the Bolt of Grand Sax weapon art is basically just a sniper rifle. It's so awesome. Alright folks, this is a surprise last entry, Spears Part 2. Our first weapon is a blood-infused Cross Naginata. The Cross Naginata can be found in Gale Tunnel, in a side passageway guarded by a land octopus. And the next weapon is the Death Ritual Spear. The Death Ritual Spear is dropped by a Deathrite bird near Castle Sol in the mountaintops of the Giants. So the Cross Naginata is a mix between a katana and a spear, and because of that, the light attack combo is going to be unique. It's really fun. It also deals innate bleed damage. And finally, the Death Ritual Spear. This weapon art is really good at dealing area damage, although if you're trying to hit a moving target, it can be really annoying at times. Alright folks, we've only got 2 weapon classes left. Let's talk about straight swords. Our first weapon is a cold-infused Lordsworn's Straightsword. To get the Lordsworn's sword, just farm the Godric soldiers at the Gatefront Ruins right at the start of the game. The next weapon is a classic, the Sword of Night and Flame. The Sword of Night and Flame can be found in Caria Manor. Start at the lower level bonfire and take the path to the left. Near the end of the path, you'll find a building you can jump onto. And finally, we've got the Regalia of Aeocade. The Regalia of Aeocade can be found at the end of Jail Cave in Caelid. The best straight sword combo is going to be the jumping attack into the normal combo. It just hits really fast. Sword of Night and Flame. I love the light attack, but the heavy attack is a little bit too slow for me. And finally, here's the Regalia. Make sure to charge up that corkscrew for maximum damage output. Alright folks, let's talk about straight swords, part 2. Our first weapon is the Coated Sword. The Coated Sword can be found on the second floor of the fortified manor. If you start at the West Capital Rampart, the fortified manor is directly in front of you to the west, and you'll find the entrance to the second floor on the left side of this building. And our next weapon is the Lazuli Glintstone Sword. The Lazuli Glintstone Sword is a rare drop from sorcerers found in Raya Lucaria. So the special feature about the Coated Sword is that it can't be blocked, and the weapon art also just hits in a really wide area. The Lazuli Glintstone Sword is a weapon I didn't pick up on at first, but I really love the weapon art. The secret is that both of these attacks have like insane amounts of stagger damage, so you're going to be able to stop enemies in their tracks even with this tiny little projectile. Alright folks, let's talk about one of the strongest weapon classes, Twinblades. In the left hand, we've got a blood-infused Godskin Peeler. To get the Godskin Peeler, you need to kill the Godskin Apostle at the top of the Windmill Village. And in the right hand, we have Eleonora's Poleblade. To get Eleonora's Poleblade, you'll need to complete Yura's quest. It all starts on the northern edge of Lake Agheel in this ravine. The next part of Yura's quest involves being summoned at the gate of Raya Lucaria. You should find a red summon sign. And finally, if you defeat Yura's assassin at the second church of Marika, you'll get the Poleblade. So part of why Twinblades are so good is because they can stack bleed insanely fast. The first attack is the jumping attack. That's 4 hits all at once. And then also, Eleonora's weapon art is going to be a ton of hits. So what does that mean? You're going to be stacking bleed like crazy. Alright folks, let's talk about whips. In the left hand, we've got Hoslow's Petal Whip. I've infused it with blood. To get this weapon, you need to kill Juno Hoslow. He's the last target of Volcano Manor. And in the right hand, we've got the Magma Whip Candlestick. Getting the candlestick is part of Patch's quest, and that all begins at Murkwater Cave. After you've forgiven Patches, come to Mount Gelmir and look for Rainbow Stones. After that, you'll find him in Volcano Manor. He'll give you a target, kill the target, talk to him again, and you'll get the candlestick. So the combo for the whips is kind of slow, but I will say the jumping attack and the running attack for the whips are some of the best attacks in the entire game. So the weapon art for the candlestick is kind of broken. You can hold it down as long as you have mana, and it can easily stun lock a lot of enemies in the game, as long as you have high enough poise.